you came on this first foreign trip making it clear that you needed public support for Canada as it faces not just a trade war. You say you were enthusiastic. Enthusiastic. That was your word today. Enthusiastic.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. So, Prime Minister Carney was in London the other day, and he decided to do a press conference. And let's just say there was many questions he didn't want to address. Specifically, ones about his investments. So first, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, let's get to this CPAC video.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz, Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements. As you know, because I know you know this, you know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary. And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions this evening, you look at the nature of the discussions, look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get. And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities. I comply with the rules well in advance, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't take his responsibilities at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities at any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
The rules.
Well, A, you should disclose all of this information right away, even if the rules say that, hey, you got a couple of months, especially with all the rumors of an election coming up extremely soon. Because, sure, the rules, yeah, what did he say, 2 to 3 months? But if we have an election coming next week, which a lot of the rumors spreading around say they are, or it is, and elections typically take about 7 weeks, we won't know what this guy is invested in and if we're just voting to make him richer. It looks really bad on him. And yet all Mark Carney says is, oh, I'm following the rules, but Pierre Poilievre isn't following the rules. He's not getting his security clearance. He keeps moving towards that, saying that Pierre Poilievre wouldn't be able to have conversations with the UK or anything like that, except that's not the Leader of the Opposition's job. That's the Prime Minister's job. So Pierre Poilievre doesn't need to have conversations about this with leaders. And even if he did have his clearance and did talk to leaders around the world about this, he couldn't talk to Canadians about his conversations, and he couldn't talk outside of Parliament about these conversations because they would be classified. So like I said, it is not his job and it is not his purview until he's Prime Minister to get this stuff.
Say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Did he just... My French is a little iffy, but did he just say, I'm complying with everything, point finished, and just totally cut the media off? This guy goes after Pierre Poilievre about being rude to the media, but Pierre Poilievre's not even the prime minister. This guy answers to the people and won't even answer such an important question. And he's not even elected by the people of Canada. He's elected by 150,000 people. This is ridiculous.
Say you are not open to any conflict of interest.
Yes.
Someone spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Bonjour, Émilie.
See, there's his dumb CEO to employee answer again. He treats the media, like I always say, like they're his employees, which they're not, and he can decide whether or not to answer them. And then he starts with this hippie stuff before, saying, you start with a point of contention, Rosemary. And this is the CBC there. If he can't even answer the CBC questions, then how can he answer, like, Rebel News? That would be crazy to see. And this guy says he stands up for Canada. When in the heck did he ever stand up for Canada? Did he stand up to Canada or for Canada when Brookfield was voting to move 4% of their assets to the United States? No, he didn't stand up to Canada for Canada then, and he hasn't worked in Canada for so long, except when he worked for, he worked in the U.S. and then worked in the U.K. and then worked for the Bank of Canada, which, be particularly honest, I wouldn't really say is working for Canada. You're working for the banking sector. And then he worked for the Liberal Party of Canada, which, let's be honest, the Liberal Party of Canada hasn't been doing the best for Canada in the past 9 years. So this dude has to prove himself a little bit more to Canadians than anything else, and he's doing a terrible job.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister. You told your defense minister to review the F-35 contracts, and what I want to know is, what exactly are you talking about? What's on the table exactly?
The way Cabinet works, or at least the way Cabinet works in my government, is the Defence Minister and I had a conversation. The Defence Minister raised the issue with me. We had a discussion about Canada's options, and the fact is that under the contract, as you may know, after a certain number of purchases, then we have options on subsequent aircrafts. Given the geopolitical environment, given the fact that there are options, given the need for value for money, given the possibility of having substantial production of alternative aircraft in Canada, as opposed to sending, as we have been, on average 80 cents of every dollar to the United States, it's prudent and in the interest of Canada to review those options, and that's what that's the process that the Defence Minister has initiated.
Is this something that your allies are asking you about, or what is it that you're telling your allies with respect to this? My understanding is that President Macron, for example, is shopping around, don't buy US, buy European military goods, and that they have replacements.
Well, I think,
what are you hearing?
well, I can tell you what's in the public domain. I can tell you in the public domain that for example, Portugal is the government of Portugal is taking steps to diversify their supply. What's also in the public domain is a very substantial effort in Europe to so-called rearm Europe, which is a significant consolidation and increase in the amount of defense spending in Europe. Now, that is of interest to us as Canada because as a potential alternative supplier, it creates the potential to create supply chains that mean that Canadian companies are participating in the development of these defense systems, and we are actively exploring. And this, full disclosure, this is one of the discussions that I had both in Paris and in the UK was the potential participation. Now, the UK is not formally in that, but we can see, particularly given our security posture in Europe, given potential steps in Ukraine, given our own security needs, that diversification of our suppliers in a way that ensures that as much as possible of that production resides in Canada and benefits Canadians in multiple ways is a prudent thing to do. That's what I can tell you.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Joël Denis Bellavance.
Carney, he was talking about the F-35s that you were looking at not buying and why you were asking your cabinet minister to look at that. Now, I totally understand why you'd ask your cabinet minister to look at that, because if you could back out of the deal with no repercussions and buy something better for cheaper, or if you had a better deal, I mean, sure, yeah. But this deal has been going on for years, so I assume I don't know. From what stuff I usually see from contracts, is there's always a little bit of a clause where you have to pay your way out after a certain time. I say, purchase the dang planes and then build in Canada. I'm just a guy who reads news on the internet. What do I know? I'm not a billionaire who's worked in the UK at the Bank of UK and Bank of Canada. What do I know? Anyways, this video is getting a little bit...
Thank you for coming.
You've seen the economic forecasts. They're not great. Are you certain that Canada can avoid a recession? And are you reopening trade negotiations with the UK?
There's a lot in that question. First off, look, this trade uncertainty, the actual tariffs, but then also the uncertainty around what other trade actions could be taken by the world's largest economy are having an impact. They're having an impact on the United States itself. That impact on the United States will continue to grow. The impact of weakening U.S. economy has an impact on everyone else. But of course it has a direct impact as well on the affected countries. It's not welcome. What we see is a number of measures that we can take ourselves. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We don't pretend to control policies of other countries. What we can control is our own domestic economic policy. There's many opportunities in Canada. It's a very strong economy, but it could be much stronger. We could have one Canadian economy instead of 13. We can build the millions of houses that Canadians need. We can diversify our trading relationships. We can build new trading corridors, and we can fully realize what Canada is, which is an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to get stronger, while those who take trade actions get weaker.
Next question. Welcome.
So he didn't really answer the question. Kinda. I think more the question was, are you going to take milk and dairy off of the no-go zones on our trade policy? Because that's what kind of broke apart the whole last free trade agreement with the UK, is we wouldn't budge on our dairy or control on our dairy cartel. So UK just said, well, if you're not going to budge on that, there's no point in continuing, and kind of blew up that whole thing. So I think that's what these reporters were asking. Now, he didn't get into really any specifics around energy or whatnot, and honestly, a lot of that will probably depend on whether or not we can build a pipeline across Canada. So I don't have any faith that Mark Carney, Carbon Tax Carney, will be doing anything with oil and gas.
Welcome back, Lise Doucette of
Come
the
home.
BBC.
Come home.
Canadian,
Yes.
Brunswicker. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. You came on this first foreign trip making it clear that you needed public support for Canada as it faces not just a trade war, you say you were enthusiastic, that was your word today, enthusiastic support as Canada faces not just a trade war, but threats to its sovereignty. You didn't get that in London. You didn't even get a press conference next to Sir Keir Starmer. Do you regret that? And if you can't take that back to Canada, tell us what is the top thing you achieved in the last 24 hours that you can go back to Canada and that you can say they have our back.
Great to see you, Lise. I'll say a couple of things. As I said when I was sworn in, which was just Friday, so you don't have to go far back in the BBC archives to find the clip. As I said then, we don't need another country to validate our sovereignty. We are sovereign. We don't need praise from another country. We are proud in and of ourselves. I would point out that the Prime Minister made a point of referring to our sovereignty, made a point of referring to our shared sovereign in King Charles III. So if you're looking for some evidence to your question, you have both my statement of Friday and you have that of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Look, this 36 hours, and that is what it is effectively, away from Canada, the focus is on security, deepening security partnerships with France, with the United Kingdom. Those discussions are necessarily sensitive. They're revealed in the full course of time. I'm encouraged by the progress that's been made. Secondly, advancing the support for Ukraine is very necessary. You may have seen that I have invited President Zelensky to the G7. I look forward to hosting him in Canada in June. There are a host of other measures that we are taking as part of the coalition willing to support that. And it also includes economic opportunities with respect to, for example, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, broadening out existing trade relationships that are functioning quite well. And I mean both CETA with respect to the provisional arrangements around CETA with respect to the European Union, where our trade has grown by more than 60%, and similarly with the UK FTA. So we're taking back a lot, but we're also taking back a deepening of our core partnerships, which is the objective. And we're 2/3 of the way through. And if you'd like to come to Iqaluit, you will see more. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now begin.
That was an extremely long non-answer. By the time he was done, I didn't even remember the question. That was nuts, but very, very well turned around, I guess. I just want to mention the way he waved his finger at the question before it was even finished asked, and treats these journalists like children. I know that they're, part of the BBC, but you can't treat foreign media like that. You have to treat them with a little bit more respect than, well, he'd treat Canadian media.
The Canadian delegation portion, à la délégation canadienne, on va prendre une 20 minutes de questions. C'est à vous.
Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg. There's been a lot of talk on this trip about cooperation in general between Canada and the UK and Canada and France, but there's areas where that cooperation is not happening right now. With the UK, the trade talks, the free trade deal between the two countries, those talks are stalled. And the UK so far has chosen not to retaliate against Trump's tariffs, whereas Canada has retaliated. Did you bring up any specific ways, either on the restarting trade talks or on coordinating retaliation in your meetings today?
Well, look, we take our own decisions with respect to our bilateral trade relationships with the United States. We're not trying to organize a coordinated retaliation. Other countries will take those decisions. For example, what we can do are a series of measures, and there are limits ultimately to this, but there's a series of measures that have maximum impact on the United States and minimum impact on Canada. Those measures that we take might have a different impact on the UK, on France. So look, we don't look for that form of coordinated retaliation. That's not helpful necessarily to those countries, but it's not helpful to the overall process. What we're looking for with respect to the United States is to have a more comprehensive discussion of and negotiation of our overall commercial and security relationship. And when the United States is ready to have that conversation, we're more than ready to sit down.
Did you bring up the stalled trade talks in your meetings?
Look, we have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom, which covers 99% of goods that are traded. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union, which covers 99% of the goods that are traded. There are issues with respect to agriculture. No, it wasn't my top priority today. My top priorities related to security, related to Ukraine, related to issues related that we will bring to the table in the G7, specifically in and around AI, critical metals and minerals, and the evolution of the commercial system. Thank you.
Good job, Bloomberg. Woohoo! Getting right to that and making sure he answers it. And that's nuts how Mark Carney just came out and said, oh, our free trade agreement was not a priority in his first visit to the UK. Our agriculture sector is a massive part of our economy, and the UK is right there and a very, very close friend of Canada. And you won't even talk on that. How utterly ridiculous is this guy? If I, in a faraway land, was prime minister, that would have been the first thing I asked. What can we do to push this thing through and try to negotiate? And hey, if milk and dairy were the things that are holding it back, I'd come back and say, hey, we got to get rid of this milk and dairy thing, at least just for the UK. They're a close friend. They're a close ally. We're tied to them by a monarch. Let's do this.
Hello, Prime Minister. Catherine Cullen from CBC. I noticed you said we have a steadfast defender in our sovereign. Behind closed doors, did any of the leaders you met with today offer assurances that they would have Canada's back if Donald Trump uses greater economic force or more to annex or absorb Canada?
Well, I would note, let me state the obvious, which is that all of us are members of NATO. All of us have respect Article 5 of NATO. So the or more part of your question is unthinkable. What we did discuss is, particularly with France, is deeper security and military cooperation, which is in the interest of overall global security. And we did discuss in both cases deepening of our economic ties. Thank you.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with CTV News. I take your point earlier on a number of our allies talking about our sovereignty today. But nobody's come out forcefully and said those comments about the 51st state are just not on. Do you think that our traditional allies are not sticking their necks out because they're concerned that if they say something that'll anger President Trump, that they'll be next?
I think I would take seriously what the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom said today. I don't think one needs to respond to every comment about another country. Look, we can stand up for ourselves. It's Canada strong. We can stand up for ourselves. We've called out those comments. They're disrespectful. They're not helpful, and they need to stop before. And conversation about our broader partnership with the United States. But we're Canada. We don't need other people to come to our aid. Come on.
Sorry.
C'est pas nécessaire d'avoir d'autres pays.
in reality, we do. If, in the craziness of craziness, the United States does look to economically crush Canada, then we will need friends in other countries to bolster our economy. And in the craziness of craziness, if the US were to ever invade, we will need Britain to protect us. We will need France to protect us because we haven't invested 2% of our GDP in our military since before 2014. Does this guy think that we do not need friends around the world? And Canada needs to go out and not just say, oh, we can do things ourselves. No, we need to be like, we're Canadian, we're the nice guys, we'll help you out. Like we did for forever before Trudeau. I mean, we can't do what during the Trudeau years where we were like, oh, we'll help out, we'll just give money away. No, we can't do it that way. But we can create free trade agreements between different countries. We can create relations and friendly relations with other countries. And Mark Carney's not doing that. He's acting arrogant. Tell me, what do you think? Do you think Mark Carney should disclose all of his holdings and pretty much where all of his investments were and was in? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you'd like to donate to the channel, down below there's a Buy Me a Coffee link. All of that's much appreciated, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Other than that, that's all, folks. Have a good day.